So let me I want to pull up my questions here. I want to start. So I guess my first question is for you, David. You know, what was your motivation for writing this book? You know, why is now a good time to write, you know, the history of Judson Studios?
Yeah, well, thanks, James, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. James is an amazing film, great way to show the exhibit, and it's a shame that we haven't been able to get in and see it, but it's really fantastic, and appreciate the time and effort you put into that because it is really well thought out and presented, and we're real honored to have it there at Forest Lawn and showing with the amazing collection of stained glass that Forest Lawn has. So. Kudos to you. It's a great, yeah, I've never seen this look so good. Well, the book kind of came about really kind of in earnest when we landed the project in Kansas City that you show with the Head of Christ. And that was, kind of the largest project that I'd ever done. I think that probably the largest the studio had ever done. And so because it was so large and because we had committed to this kind of fusing technology, we really needed an additional space. Being in a historic structure, we weren't able to kind of electrify, so to speak, or modernize the space to manage the capacity of the project that we were taking on. And so that forced me to go and find another facility. And that felt very strange, like a very, very big decision for a very old company to go out and open another facility, right? And so that kind of made me stop and think about, well, what's the history of the company, the decisions that have been made before, the hardships and the difficulties that as a small family business you kind of go through day in and day out. And so for me to really kind of hunker down and get an understanding of what my forefathers had been through and decisions they've made and how they evolved. And really the question that I had at the time was, why had nobody done this before? And so nobody in the industry, nobody in the world, so why not just focus right here on Judson, and why kind of figure out, well, where did they come from? Where did they how did they develop? I know they constantly were trying new things, but this seemed really far out of the range of kind of what Judson was known for. And so that really made me want to kind of go back and just really understand our past and really to kind of get an idea and a vision of the future, right? And where we're going. I mean, it's a very different time in the 21st century. We're dealing with a very ancient craft, and the challenges of that are very dynamic in the sense of, creating art, but also running a business, and where can we take this thing? Yeah, and the fusing to me felt like just a total, like, opening a door to new possibilities that I had never even thought of before. After spending 20 years in the business and growing up and around, seeing what my father was doing, my parents were doing with the business, this really was something that was an eye opener and made me kind of really want to go back and look at the history and understand a little bit more to think about as an enterprise, as a company, where it goes from here, and how it fits into the story of LA. And that's kind of really where we ended up taking it as it developed.
Great, thank you. Steffi, so how did you meet David? How did what's the origin of your collaboration with him?
Well, I was the editor of Pasadena magazine, as you mentioned, and we were always looking for interesting stories about creative people of the what we called the SGV, the San Gabriel Valley, and so Highland Park fit in. And a friend of mine who I guess knew, like, it was a connection through David's their children, she told me about this stained glass studio, and I did not know of it, but of course, she mentioned that that Judson had worked on the Hollyhock House and the Ennis House and was this really historic studio. And so it seemed it was just an obviously great story. And I assigned it to a writer who was on this call, Pauline O'Connor. And then a few years later, it came back around. David was looking for a writer, and we finally met, and I went to the studio, and it just seemed like such a great, rich story that I wanted to help tell. And, I think we had a common vision. I was excited about the new directions he was taking the studio, and it's been a really, we wrapped it up a little while ago, but it was a 3-year process, and a lot has changed with the studio. David has really pushed it even further, and what he set out to do with the new studio has really lived up to its promise. So they're doing some great work now.
Yeah. So actually, this question's for both of you. So in your view, what was the role of, what's Judson's role in the LA art world during the 20th century? And then kind of how do you envision their role now in 21st century? It's a big one, but.
Yeah, well, I think, part of the reason I wanted to work with Steffie on the book too was that she came at it from kind of a journalistic viewpoint, so to speak. I didn't want it to be just a history. I wanted it to be, kind of how did the Judson Studios kind of fit into the fabric of Los Angeles and, in the art and design world, right? And architecture, because when you think of stained glass, it's generally associated with architecture, which makes sense. And, but at the same time, there's definitely this kind of art world aspect of it that I think, working with different artists over the history of the company, the types of buildings that went in, I think what was so interesting to see as we were researching the book is how Judson kind of transformed with the period, right? The times, like architectural styles and design styles and these things that really have an influence that stained glass generally working in these built environments, how that kind of what role that had and had that changed. And so that was kind of what was interesting and intriguing to me as we kind of went through a lot of the historical periods in the 20th century. And then in terms of the 21st century, for me, I think that's really what I'm focused on now, kind of the vision and what the possibilities are. One of the things that has always been exciting, intriguing for me is working with outside artists, that don't work in glass. So like Joe Gurgis and a lot of the artists that are in our exhibition didn't really have a lot of exposure to glass. And so what is exciting about me is that our new facility has really created this environment where people can come in and experiment and try new things and really kind of create ideas and concepts that we've never seen before. And that's what I'm most excited about, is that I think, traditionally we think of stained glass in, maybe the house of worship that we grew up in, or, maybe our aunt or our uncle did stained glass in the garage. You have these kind of connections with the glass world. But now I think we want to kind of break through that a little bit and make it think about glass in a very different way. And I think that in terms of the art world and the architectural world, I think it's primed for that kind of, pushing the envelope in that direction. So I'm really excited to kind of see, where we go with that. We're looking at a lot of public art projects now, a lot of places where you maybe not think of seeing stained glass or associate with stained glass, I think is where I'd like to see stained glass, and so that the use of color, I think is coming back in a lot of ways. And just again, I think, and being, in a pandemic and being quarantined for so long, you realize how important public spaces are to us, right? And how that affects our lives and how that inspires us and creates a sense of space, right? After being cooped up so long, I think we're all ready for that, to get back into that environment again. So that's, I'm kind of excited about where the possibilities that we have with the glass and the fusing technology kind of, again, just opened up a whole new world of possibilities for us that I'm hoping we can really attract a lot of exciting artists, continue to attract a lot of exciting artists to move forward.
Yeah.
I think one of the ongoing conversations we had was about the difference between design and fine art, and the way that stained glass had always been perceived as like a craft. But there's no reason that this medium can't be fine art, but it's really like a matter of perception. And I do think that the more artists who see fine art made with stained glass, they start thinking of it as a possible medium. I mean, there have been a number of articles talking about the renaissance of stained glass in the art and design worlds. And it's just, I think it's expanding and opening up largely because of many of the projects that Judson has done in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Steffi, I know how David got into this. He was, born into it. What were your impressions or experiences with Judson Stained Glass prior to working on this book? Like, were you familiar with a lot of their commissions, or what was your sort of entree into it?
Well, being a culture journalist in Los Angeles, of course, I knew of the Hollyhock House and the Ennis House, Frank Lloyd Wright's, famous homes. So it was, exciting to me to learn that they had created those windows. And I'd been to the Museum of Natural History, but I think when David and I first met, it was right around the time that the renovated Ace Hotel and Theater had opened, and I had been on, tours of the space, and it just felt like this exciting new space downtown. So when I learned that they had done the windows in the hotel, that sort of illustrated the way that this studio can bridge the gap. And what was very interesting for me, as someone who had also just moved to Highland Park, was learning the history of the Arroyo Seco region and the culture of artists here, really supported by William Lease Judson, of course, who was the first dean of the USC School of Fine Arts. And the Judson Studios, the old studio, is actually the former School of Fine Arts.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to learn about that, really some of the earliest culture in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Both, regarding your research, I'm wondering if there were any sort of, really surprising things you came across. Or David, I'm curious if you, in your research, were able to either confirm or sort of debunk any like Judson myths, any projects that, lost projects or lost collaborations or anything like that. Any sort of really interesting gems that you came across in your research that really surprised you?
There were some pleasant surprises. I think one of the biggest surprises for me, I didn't know that Judson had done, was the Globe Chandelier down at the LA Public Library in downtown Los Angeles. And that, I don't think I knew that Judson had done that. And so that's a spectacular piece. The space itself is amazing. The artist who did it is the same artist who did the Atlas Shrugged in Rockefeller Center. So it was kind of this interesting tiny, the architect is Goodhue. So all these amazing connections for me, I think, were really exciting to kind of see and to know that is such this amazing landmark and amazing piece, and it's survived, the fire and all of these things. It's still there, and really a beautiful piece. And it's, it's 9 feet in diameter, and if you've been in that space, you walk it looks like it's maybe 4. It's like maybe half that, but it's a really large, amazing piece.
I think really early on, I asked you, do you think we could get that for the exhibition? And I think you kind of rolled your eyes at me. I had no idea it was that large. And obviously, a glass globe from 40 feet to art gallery would be really tough.
No problem.
Yeah.
But, it may have fit in the Hall of Crucifixion.
In the Hall of Crucifixion. Yeah. And then Steffi, did you sort of come across any surprises or anything in your research?
Well, I mean, one of the most exciting developments in the book was the realization that Judson had in fact designed the windows for the Ennis house, working with Mrs. Ennis. We sort of pieced that together with the timing of the invoices and who the invoice was addressed to, because Frank Lloyd Wright left that project maybe before it was completed. So, and you know, the date of the window invoice was after he had, I think, gone to Japan. Was that he was working on the Imperial Hotel?
Yeah.
And then, you know, we found reference materials that the designers drew from to create the windows. And so that was really cool, because, you know, the colors are beautiful. They're really interesting windows. And that's a new piece of Frank Lloyd Wright scholarship. So it was, and we feel pretty confident about that, right, David? I mean, because, you know, the scholarship is written in stone. So to challenge that was, for me as a writer, exciting.
That's always a very exciting sort of like Dan Brown in the archives, like together these elements. When you finally have that actual discovery, you're like, I discovered this is real.
Yeah, it's a real discovery. I just wanted to mention one window that we really hoped was a Judson window was at the Tower Theater downtown, which is it's in the process of being renovated as an Apple store. And we just never found that documentation. We looked at it and we thought it looked like a Judson window, right, from the outside.
Yeah, a lot of the
never found it.
Yeah, a lot of those early projects along the Broadway corridor that are kind of being restored now, a lot of that was really hard to track down. And we felt like we got so close so many times that we just couldn't, you know, we tried to be really, you know, hard on ourselves to find that really specific, you know, information. And if we couldn't find it, we had to leave it out. That happened in a number of cases where we were pretty confident that it was Judson, but we didn't have proof of it, so it had to be left out. And so there's, you know, the curse of my forefathers, I always say, is you didn't sign and date the windows. It's like, just sign and date the windows, you know. So that's my pet peeve now with our folks in the studio: sign and date the windows, you know. So that would help.
And those are nice little Easter eggs. As you know, there are a few Judson. We have hundreds of stained glass windows throughout Forest Lawn, and there's a handful that are by Judson, and about half of them are signed. And it's always neat to, like, when you get that, it's like, oh yes, you know, and a lot of times it's dated. Some have the Griffin logo on them. And then the ones for the Hall of Crucifixion Resurrection, I did go up on scaffolding. I couldn't find any signatures. I had a harness on. I couldn't find signatures. But then in our archives, we did find, after the book you finished writing the book, we actually did find the contracts for those. And that was really exciting because, you know, it was written up in our 1960s guidebooks that these were Judson windows, and sometimes there's a little bit of legend in those. And it was really satisfying to see the contracts and things signed by your grandfather. You know, great grandfather at that point, 49, 51. It was like, oh, all right. So that was very, very exciting too.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Discover that. Yeah. Moving on here a bit, David, I'm curious, you know, I read an article recently there's a great article in the New York Times about sort of legacy companies in Japan, and some of them, they're 1,000-year-old shops in Japan, which is just like unbelievable to think about. I mean, your family's been in the business for over 120 years, and that's unbelievably impressive. But how do you balance tradition versus innovation? You know, how do you stay true to your roots, but also strive to innovate at the same time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Something, you know, you kind of struggle with. because and that, you know, there's a lot of, I could talk a lot about this, but you know, one of the interesting things about developing the relationship with Narcissus, for example, Narcissus came to glass from a completely different way, right? I mean, his family is not involved with glass at all. He's an artist, got involved with glass, and then when we asked Narcissus to come and be involved at the studio, I mean, for him it was like, why would I do that? Like Judson Studios is a very traditional studio. I have nothing, like, that's not part of my DNA, so to speak. And so, you know, it took a little convincing for him to understand, like, look, you know, we're doing some, you know, interesting things here, and we really want to push the envelope. And so that was kind of a way of seeing somebody who came from it in a very different way, totally clean slate, no preconceived notions, no history of that, and what he was doing with glass versus, you know, someone like myself, who's the fifth generation, very kind of traditional exposure to glass. Having those two worlds collide has been really interesting to see that come to life. You know, for me, when I started really in earnest working at the studio in the early 90s or mid 90s, I was always looking at like what was going on in Germany and what the Europeans were doing. And the Germans were really cutting edge. It was, you know, and there's this major split and I talk about it in some of my talks about after World War II, you know, Europe's basically destroyed. You know, a lot of the windows obviously in the cathedrals were preserved, but a lot of them were lost. And so when they went to go remake those windows, they made them very abstract, very cutting edge. You know, you think about Bauhaus, right? And before the war, that kind of influence kind of carries on into the windows in Germany and most of Europe. Whereas it's the totally opposite thing in the United States, where all the buildings, one of the interesting things we found about the book too, is that so many of these Gothic churches were built in the early 20th century. Then the Depression hit, and then World War II came. Well, the glass didn't get put into those windows until after the war. And so a lot of the traditional Gothic, neo-Gothic windows were going in the, you know, starting in the late 40s up until the early 70s, just about. And so that to me was a huge kind of difference between what was going on, you know, what you usually assume of cutting edge California and Southern California with doing very traditional stuff versus what's going on in Europe is very contemporary. And so for me, it didn't resonate with me in the sense of like, why is that true? Because I really enjoyed what was going on in Europe and the modern stuff. And what I noticed is that all the American artists were going to Europe to do their stained glass. So if there was an artist who was working in glass, they were going to Europe to do it, to Germany to do it, as opposed to here in the United States. And so for me, I felt like, well, that's something that we're missing something here. And so when the fusing opportunity came with the large project, that made perfect sense to me. And you know, fusing is a very American thing. You know, Bullseye, which, you know, it developed up in the Northwest. That to me just kind of resonated immediately. And that being said, that was developed out of studying traditional work, you know, and Tim Carey, who designed the window at the Church of the Resurrection, he and I, you know, I really pushed him to learn how to paint the traditional, you know, methods. And we really studied traditional work. And it was that traditional work, you know, understanding that traditional work that really pushed us and allowed us to move it to the next phase. So basically, you know, my foundation is still in that traditional work, but with that traditional work, I'm very comfortable moving into a more contemporary realm with the understanding of, you know, those principles don't change, so to speak, right? So we're still utilizing traditional techniques and things that can be interpreted in a very contemporary way, but they're built off of that foundation. And so it's a balance that, you know, you constantly you know, question yourself, but I feel like it comes from a pretty genuine place, and I think that's what, you know, kind of allows me to really kind of feel comfortable pushing forward.
Yeah. Kind of piggybacking on one thing you said there, I'm going to answer one of the questions here. Someone said, where in Los Angeles can we view stained glass that is secular? And one would be the globe chandelier in the center of the LA Public Library, the Rotunda. But another one is something that you just did, and it was a collaboration with Tim Carey, and it's the Ray Bradbury Window. Is that correct? In
Yes.
is it the South Pasadena Library?
South Pasadena Library. Yep, that's right. Those are fused contemporary windows. Those are just installed at for Halloween. It's a Halloween theme, and Ray Bradbury had a long history with South Pasadena, so those are very great windows. The Memorial Library, there's World War I memorial window there, and at the Memorial Library in LA. And then my brother did a public art project there in the early mid 90s, I think. And then Ace Hotel, which Steffi mentioned earlier. There's a couple other places downtown. I'm blanking on the names right now, but not a lot, actually. There's Forest Lawn. Wheezy.
And this is actually, I'll kind of piggyback on that question to answer another question in the Q&A. So the exhibition, as you saw, some of it is, a lot of it is, liturgical stained glass or stained glass designs, but, I'd say a more or less half of it, if not a little more, is sort of secular subject matter, even completely abstract subject matter, as you saw. And then someone said, well, will the exhibit be installed until the public can see it after the pandemic restrictions are lifted? That is the plan. I really, really hope so. I think that's going to happen. I mean, honestly, everything's sort of frozen, right? Like no museums are showing anything and no new stuff is happening. There's an endpoint to, when that is, but I hope so. And I believe it will be. So I look forward to welcoming people when it is safe to do so, because I'm very proud of the exhibition. And there's so many cool, brand new things and really old things. And seeing the old stuff next to the new stuff, it makes you appreciate both, even more than you did. So that's sort of very, I don't know. It's one of my favorite parts of the exhibition there. If I may.
It's great.
Actually, I have a question for both of you regarding photography. The photography in the book is really stunning. Can you tell me about the process of photographing art glass? Because it seems to me a difficult medium to capture, because by its very nature, it changes drastically depending on the light. Did you have discussions about how you wanted to capture stuff, or was it just pretty obvious, this is the best picture and this is not?
Steffi, you want to say anything about that, or you?
I feel like you probably have more to say about the best way to photograph stained glass. I mean, I think what was always a challenge is getting the window and the space, because the light blocks out the background. But David found a photographer he contacted you, but you talk about Alexander Vertikoff, who you feel is a master of photographing glass, right?
Yeah, well, Alex is an amazing photographer who I've known for years, and does a lot of arts and crafts photography, a lot of architectural photography, and I think he kind of fit in with the philosophical approach. I mean, I think there was two things going on. One was, and this kind of drove a lot about what was in the book, is just finding good photographs, right? And we wanted to use photographs that really could show what we were writing about. And so that kind of drove a lot of the content of the book, is that, we have a lot of photographs, but we don't have a lot of great photographs. And so that was really something that we drove kind of the project in terms of the historical aspects. And then, then there was this long period of deciding, okay, well, we don't have photographs, but we can photograph it. But then it becomes an economic question, right? Like how much, there's only so many photographs you can actually take. And so that list then got smaller. And so when the list got to Alex Vertikoff, it was a pretty short list. We said, okay, these are the things that we really want. And the other philosophical approach about that is that I looked at a lot of books when I started conceptualizing this book, and one idea that I saw was that the photographs of the windows were just of the window, right? They didn't include anything with interior space, and so part of that is because it's some sense of well, this is the honest photograph, right? In the sense of when you take a picture, you either get the interior, like Steffie said, or you get the window, right? You can't have both. But with technology now, you can get both. And so I think that was the thing, is that when you're looking at some of the photographs that Alex took, it's actually, 24 exposures put together. And so that, I think, is like, why not? I think that's pretty spectacular to be able to see that. And it's an honest representation of what the space is, even though it may not be something that you would see. I mean, the eye can capture and adjust the light so much better than the cameras can. And so there was a lot of, kind of thought behind all of that. But, part of it was what was available, part of it was what it was going to cost us, and part of it was what we really, really wanted to get in there. And so the shots, for example, of the Frank Lloyd Wright houses that Alex took are spectacular. We put as many of those in the book as we could, and he's just got a great eye for how to capture the space. Part of what we were writing about was how the glass, the role of glass in a space, in the architecture. And so to be able to have both of those in the exposures and photographs really kind of told the story that we wanted to tell.
Yeah. One of the questions from the chat is, where did you find the documentation?
Judson has very, very extensive files.
Yeah.
I mean, going way, way back. They may not have signed everything, but I mean,
yeah, there's a
David,
lot of files.
we would just, be in the conference room with stacks of files, many days.
And things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes sketches, but yeah, I mean, that's how we put the chronology together.
Yeah, and luckily there were a couple outside sources where another really amazing surprise was Pasadena Pasadena Museum of History called and wanted to come down one day and had found this material. Well, they had what is in the book is the earliest photograph when Judson Studios at the time was called Colonial Art Glass. And so this window was in the original Phineas Mansion, which is on Orange Grove Boulevard in Pasadena, a Moroccan, North African looking building. This kind of Islamic pattern dome. You talked about the number of domes. Well, one of the first projects was a dome in this house, and they had photographs. They had all the correspondence with Mrs. Phineas and the architect and Judson. And so it was like, yeah, we found this. And it was like, wow, it was like amazing that to see that, because not even Judson had that information. And something dating back to our founding of 1897 was really just a great, piece that really helped us with, the story and that earliest moment of when Judson started in glass. And it was kind of exciting to have that.
Very cool. My next question here. Kind of, it is a little bit related to the archive, but so Frederick Wilson, who I mentioned in my tour there, and there's two pieces by him, and he may have actually contributed to a couple others. So he was the sort of, big name from Tiffany Studios on the East Coast, and then he came out here and spent the final decade out here. And in the book, you talk a lot about Frederick Wilson. Do you think, can you discuss, especially after all this historical research, the role that he played in the growth and development of Judson Studios? And kind of, I don't know, would it be safe to say that aside from members of the Judson family, that no other person had as big an influence on the studio, at least in the early years?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other amazing thing about the studio over the years is the people that work there, right? And it really was kind of interesting. Unfortunately, not a lot of names were in a lot of the work, a lot of the files and that kind of thing, but you definitely got this sense of that the work was based on the success of the people that were working there at the time, right? But I think in terms of Frederick Wilson, to me, I think he's the most important stained glass artist working in the United States. I mean, he was born in England, but like you said, worked for Tiffany for a number of years. Some of the most important Tiffany windows at least figurative windows are his designs. And I think he did kind of, he stepped up the level at Judson Studios for sure. I mean, I think it was something that, I mean, he was never an employee. He was always an outside contractor, but he lived around, his house was behind the studio, literally, like you could throw a stone and it hit his house. And, you know, his impact, I think, was really important, not only for Judson Studios, but for the West Coast and the windows that he made. One of the most interesting ones, stories is at All Saints Church in Pasadena. So if you've ever been in that church, the transepts are Tiffany windows, which Wilson did, but the choir loft window, which looks like a Tiffany window, is actually a Judson window, but also designed by Frederick Wilson. So it's this amazing, you know, connection of New York and Los Angeles and the story of Frederick Wilson. And so, you know, and his works are collected by the very important pieces that are collected by museums. And so unfortunately, we have a number of his sketches that we don't know where they belong, like where the windows are. And so unfortunately, a lot of those designs we couldn't track down. But again, very pleasant surprises that we found down in some cemeteries and mausoleums down in San Diego and different areas, because he was here during the Depression era when a lot of the cemetery work was being done. And so, yeah, really important, I think, not only for stained glass in the United States, but for Judson and the West Coast. I think really created a tone and a level of work that I think, you know, he kind of maintained for the years and after that.
Interesting. Yeah, that definitely comes across in the book, how big a role he plays. And then we mentioned sort of domes and skylights a couple times, and they're featured prominently in the book and in the exhibition. And it looks like from the earliest years of the studio to the 1970s, when your father ran the studio, to the fused glass domes of today, are there any challenges in executing a dome? I mean, because they're three-dimensional, they're also, it's just sort of a lot of expanse of glass. Are there any sort of engineering challenges to that, or is it sort of an easy solution as a non-engineer? I asked.
They're a total nightmare. Yeah, the Amini dome that you showed, that is really, I think, the first and only, the first one that Narcissus ever did, and I think it's the only major fused glass dome that's entirely of fused glass. And you know, that unfortunately, we were called into that project after the frame was built, and the frame wasn't built properly, and so it was never a good solution for us. It was a very difficult project to adapt to a frame that was not built properly. I'll never do that again. You know, we should have scrapped it and started over. But yeah, and you know, you mentioned my father, the one that was done at the Tropicana Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas is still there. Apparently they were going to take it out a few years ago, and then they ended up keeping it, and that's completely suspended. So it's actually been engineered. It was engineered at a time when they were still doing nuclear testing out in the desert, and so the casinos would get an occasional jolt, and so that piece had to be able to move, and so it's completely suspended over the casino. And then there's like, I believe there's two-way mirrors on the side. So there's a little catwalk on the edge of it, so you can look through certain parts of it. And then the cameras are set in the center, in between some of the panels that are up at the top. And so it's a very interesting, intriguing piece. And one of my earliest childhood memories is going to Vegas and seeing that, all that kind of come to life. And so it was really kind of an interesting time in Vegas, right? And my dad did a lot of work in Vegas in the 70s, and you know, Caesar's Palace and MGM. A lot of the casinos were doing glass, and Judson was, you know, before a lot of companies moved into Vegas, Judson was kind of the source for stained glass in Vegas.
It's funny, I'd never thought of this before, but you know, stained glass is so sacred. And has these liturgical, and it really does have a sacred feeling when you see a subject in stained glass. But then for Sin City to really embrace it, like it's so like opulent, and there's so much color and light and reflection and all these things. So like but it's a very sensory experience, or it should be, to be in a church. And it's also a more overstimulation to be in a casino. So it is.
Right.
I don't know, but it is. That's kind of weird that it works really well in both.
As you say, we don't discriminate against any religions.
There you go.
But yeah, that was. I mean, it is a very sacred thing. But yeah, I mean, growing up around the studio and walking through the studio, and a lot of the muse images that I saw growing up were. Where I saw a lot of things that as a young guy that I'd never seen before, and a lot of language that I'd never heard before. So
Interesting.
it's a little bit of a sausage factory. You know, the studio is. You know, it's a very labor-intensive, strenuous process, but the beauty, the end result is really spectacular. But in the making of it, it can be a very strenuous and difficult process.
Interesting. I want to answer a few more questions from the Q&A part here. Someone said, Charlie says, what percentage of contemporary Judson projects are funded by institutions or architectural projects versus like individual artists or grant funded? Yeah. So how does the funding work on a lot of these?
Yeah, so well, we're still primarily religious work. So we have a lot of religious work. So for right now, we have one of our largest contracts is for a monastery that's in Wyoming that we're doing. The restoration work that we're doing for the Air Force Academy Chapel in Colorado Springs is federally funded. So that's coming out of the defense budget. So your defense money is going to something really beautiful. So, and then now we're looking at more public art projects. So there's a larger percentage of our work that's in the public art realm. So we've been talking to, we've done a couple of projects with LA County Arts Commission. We've been talking to LA Metro. We are a fabricator for the Seattle Sound Transit Authority now. So we will be working on some stations starting in 2021 up there. So we'll be making art glass up there. So we're starting to see a lot of that kind of as a market. And that's kind of something that we've been looking at in terms of our diversity of finding, you know, a diverse clientele. The dome, the Amini dome that you saw that Narcissus did, that's in a residence. So that's a privately funded. We do a lot of residential work. James Jean, the artist, I don't think we've seen any of his work. I can show some of his work. He's personally funding his work. So he funds his work and then he sells it. So Joe funded his window that you saw there. So some of these artists will fund them. But it's a balance, you know, it's kind of, it depends on the type of year. Sometimes we're real heavy on restoration work, and that may be coming out of preservation funds, out of city funds or federal funds, like I said, or we might be doing religious, you know, a lot of religious work at a time, or we may be doing, you know, public art agency work. So it really depends on the nature of the projects and the time and kind of what's going on at a particular process, you know. But I think the thing that they all have in common is they're very long kind of development periods. And so things don't happen very quickly. You know, things happen, and it's kind of helped us a little bit in this time. You know, luckily we had a couple of large projects. We had to shut down in March through May, completely shut down for a couple of months. And then when we opened back up, luckily we had some clients that were ready to fund projects and keep us operating. So we've been real lucky in that regard.
My wife is saying 5 minutes.
Okay, she's wrapping it up.
I want to know. So we're not in a rush, but I want to be mindful of everyone's evenings. A couple quick things. Are there signed copies of the book to buy? If you buy it through, so explain this.
Yeah, so if you buy, I think you posted the link in the chat for Angel City Press.
I did, yeah.
So if you go to Angel City Press's website, and there's a place for you to put in a request for a signed publication. If you want it inscribed, you can put that in. So if you want it personalized, sign the book, and we'll ship it out. And so Angel City Press is very good at that. It's a quick turnaround. You can get it before Christmas. So we'll sign it and get it to you before Christmas. So it's a great gift, very, very unique gift if you're looking for that person who has everything. And this is a good one to give out.
And then someone else asks, will there be any exhibition-related merchandise in the museum store gift shop once you reopen? We will be selling the book there when we reopen, and we do have a few things. We have some like small dishes and a few sort of like really small pieces. Those will probably be the only Judson pieces I can ever afford, but they're really nice. We have a few in stock. We're not set up to sell those online right now, but when we reopen, we will be selling some really nice but small, affordable pieces. So I'm
we do have some of those on our website too.
Yeah, it's from your stockpile there. And then someone else said, is that sort of video I showed going to be available? I am going to post pieces of it on our Forest Lawn Museum YouTube page. And I also post different segments on our Instagram. So shameless plug, but follow us at Forest Lawn Museum. And I'm the guy doing the posting, and I post stuff, multiple times a week, and I do some longer videos a couple times a month. I did an interview with Shea Bredimus, who was really kind, and he came up and gave me a lot of time, and it was really fun talking with him. So that's on our IGTV, our Instagram TV. You can find it on our at Forest Lawn Museum Instagram. And I'm trying to, there's so many beautiful images, and it does photograph, the windows photograph so nicely and so dramatically, but I will put in different segments, I'll cover the entire exhibition. So follow us at Forest Lawn Museum. Someone's asking, where is the Vegas glass? There is some of the Vegas glass is covered in the book. You get everything from churches all the way to the David Flores piece, the muralist, and also Vegas. There's a lot, the Air Force Academy, Frank Lloyd Wright, so many different things are covered in the book.
Yeah, that was another thing that kind of came about and evolved quite a bit, I would say, is that as we gather information, the chapters didn't really flesh out until we had kind of a critical mass of information. It was very difficult to determine the chapters, I would say, Steffie, don't you think? It's like, and so we didn't want the book just to be religious artwork, which it could have been. Yeah, so we have 2 chapters that we made very specific to religious artwork in 2 very different periods, pre-war and after the war, and then there's kind of different chapters that are on the generations as well. So we address kind of the different generations of different projects that they did over time, and then the last there's a chapter dedicated to the window in Kansas City. That's 34. It's the largest fused glass window in the world, and then the last chapter really talks about these collaborations that are very prominent in your exhibition, working with artists. I've done a lot of research in terms of artists that work in stained glass. So you mentioned Albert Dürer, and a lot of people don't know, like Picasso and Braque. Most people know Matisse. There's a lot of
Marc Chagall has a.
Chagall, yeah, he's just really prominent
David
artists that work in
Hockney.
stained glass, and a lot of them that are known to have started in art glass late in their careers, wishing they had started earlier. And so, so that's really there's quite a bit of information that in the book as well. And so, yeah, it's a really kind of an interesting thread of not only the company but of architecture, design, glass, over the 20th century and
the city of Los Angeles. I think that's what's so interesting and really strengthens the story. The city and the studio kind of came up at the same time and evolved, and the medium evolved as culture evolved. And so there's this real interplay of, work and life and art. And it's a rich story.
Absolutely. And I was impressed how the people come through as well. It feels very personal, but then it's also just so visually stunning. Yeah, I want to be mindful of people's time. I'm curious, what's next for each of you? The book's done. It's I remember talking to you about it before it was done. And when a book, I know from experience, when a book's not done, it's not done. And the book's done. So congratulations.
It's done.
It's hefty too. So what's next for each of you? I'd like to sort of end on that.
Um, well, I'm just, I'm a writer, so I just wrote an interesting article about a new Library of Esoterica series from Taschen for the LA Times that will be coming out in a couple of weeks. And through the pandemic, I've been working with a group of women that I have a Saturday morning Zoom call with. And it's a group of creative women, artists, designers, and we have put together an art project that is a book called Saturday Morning. And we're going to be putting that out digitally, and there will be a print version available around Christmas time. So it'll just be like a PDF, but we've all made work that relates to this time in history. So that's what I've got going on.
Yeah, and we're just really kind of developing and pushing the envelope on the fused glass world. We're really the only fused glass major studio in the world. And so this is something that we're finding is tremendously kind of exciting, intriguing. We realize we've just scratched the surface. There's a lot to come. Narcissus still works with us. He'll be coming back early next year. And we're actually working on a book. So kind of where this book is left off, we're hoping to kind of continue that conversation in terms of where things are going, because part of like what Steffie and I found towards the end of the book too is it's kind of a moving target, right? It's like you're trying to write history, but things are changing almost daily, right? And so now it's really kind of changing, and we find new projects coming through that are really kind of exciting and interesting to see where things have developed since we started this book. And so we want not only to talk about the projects that we're doing, but the process and how this fits in historically, because it's a really interesting story. And I do go into it a little bit in this book about, how this is a very West Coast kind of cultural phenomenon, so to speak, and part of my question of why this is happening here and why it's happening now, really did kind of come together by a lot of historical threads that are very American and very unique to Southern California and Los Angeles. And so I hope to expound a little bit more on that and kind of see where this is going kind of into the future.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm actually going to, assuming the recording worked, I'm going to post this on the Forest Lawn Museum YouTube page. Someone's asking, are there other stained glass works by Judson in mausoleums at Forest Lawn? The short answer is follow us on Instagram at Forest Lawn Museum, and I'll post on them. But yes, there are numerous parks, numerous pieces in the Great Mausoleum, in the Freedom Mausoleum, in churches. But follow us and you'll get amazing behind the scenes insight.
And Judson Studios Instagram page too. Yeah, you can get stuff there. Yeah.
You Judson Studios at Judson Studios, they post a lot of great stuff, and I kind of repost everything you do, and you repost everything. Yeah. But you guys post a lot of great stuff. But I look forward to someday, seeing everyone here in person and having you see the exhibition, because it's so many people put so much hard work into it. So many members of the Judson team, so many of the artists. It was a lot of work, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. So I look forward to seeing it in person. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay inside, and take care of yourselves. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, James.
Thank you so much for your
Merry
support,
Christmas, everybody.
James. Yeah.
Christmas,
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thanks for being here.
All right.
Bye.
You guys are welcome to log off. This will be posted. Everyone, the numbers are going down. I'm going to post it on YouTube.
Great.
We'll see what.
Oh, okay. The whole talk.
Yeah, there's a record function.
Okay, great.
So we'll see what happens. But thank you so
Excellent.
much. I appreciate your thoughts and your time. And is that Melissa answering a question there? Thank you.
Really? Oh, well, I mean, we could stay for a
Yeah.
sec.
Are there any O'Shea?
I was
All
looking
right.
at him.
Yeah. We still have 66 people on the call here. Is there, David, have you ever thought about like an educational apprentice program as one of the,
Yes.
and do you actually have that? Do you have like a like a high school or young interns or?
Yeah, we do. We have interns, high school interns, and then we do bring in artists as apprentices, and so artists in residence. So we do have a program that we're developing and building, but we do have folks that come in. In terms of education, Bullseye does a lot of classes. Narcissus does classes at the studio, and Narcissus is really focusing on kind of instructional material for fusing and that kind of thing too. So yeah, education is definitely something we're working on.
Right. What else? Let's see here. And where is the Wyoming Monastery?
It is in a place called Meeteetse, which is just southwest of Cody, Wyoming. And it's kind of tucked. You have to drive through 2 private ranches because, Wyoming's basically all ranches, right? There's only a handful of families, I guess, that own most of the property in Wyoming. But it's at the base of a hill along a river. It's a really spectacular space. I mean, when you pull up to it, you feel like you're in the 13th century. And
When will that be finished?
I don't know. It's going a lot slower than I think they expected, and so they're still plugging away. They're doing a lot of the work themselves, a lot of the stonework themselves. They built their own stone yard, and
Right.
they're carving a lot of the stone themselves. So it's taking a really long time.
As you would think it might.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Like cathedrals weren't built overnight, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you in the chat
Amazing.
there. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate you joining us, and your pieces look really great in the gallery. It's sort of monumental in the space. So thank you for participating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, and both of you. Congratulations on the book. It is really, really super, and I got a copy last spring, like right as I was finishing writing all the wall labels, and it was really helpful to kind of finish that. And it reads very easily, and it's the images are really stunning. I can tell how much work it must have been.
And we had a good editor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Angel City Press. Yeah, she asked some hard questions sometimes, but it definitely helped us really answer the questions, and really figure out what we were trying to say.
Yeah, we rewrote a lot.
You rewrote a lot, you said?
Yeah, we rewrote a lot. I mean, the editing was a very difficult kind of sometimes the chapters flowed and were very easy. Some of them were very difficult and had to be rewritten. So it was tricky. But yeah, it was a very Angel City Press was great partner with that, and really exciting to see them do well, and they're growing as well. They've expanded their distribution, and it was a good fit for us with the history of LA. Their focus on the history of LA and kind of niche things like that. It's a good fit.
It's very, very, very early in the process, but I think it'd be great to do a Forest Lawn, the Art of Forest Lawn book. With Angel City, and I mean, even just like the format, sort of like the amount of text, the way you tell the story, the amount of like high quality images. I think I would love to do the same thing. So I'll be using if this is able to progress, and I have a lot of other things I need to do, but I think it will serve me as a really good model if that does happen.
Great.
Well, there's so much interesting history to Forest Lawn.
Yeah.
Too,
Yeah.
I mean, just I remember in some of the early research, and I don't think it's in the book, but you know, Forest Lawn really pitched itself as a place to have weddings. It wasn't just
We still do. We still have weddings. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's or like it was called an art park or something. Like just it was really this seen as a cultural site, and that's not necessarily the perception, but because of that, it was just so beautiful and had so much art always.
Yeah, art has really been central to the mission pretty much from the start. And you know, it's funny because some people are sort of put off by the idea of visiting a cemetery. And then even people who are, the second they get there, they're kind of like, whoa, you know, this isn't what I expected. And so it's really exciting because it's so, there's so much art, and it's so well thought out, you know, sort of start to finish, from the grounds to the buildings to the statuary. I never thought I would work at a cemetery, and
Yeah.
it's really an incredible place to work, and an incredible, like, way more artistic opportunities than I ever thought would be available to me. So I really do like it a lot. So yeah.
And so what happened with the David statue? Can you talk about that? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So our marble replica of Michelangelo's David, full scale, it cracked at the ankle and fell
No way.
on March 8th. And we've had a couple that have fallen before from earthquakes, and this was probably like cumulative seismic activity. So it's going to be replaced. It's going to be replaced, and the new one will be reinstalled at some point in 2021. And in order to not have it fall again, we've commissioned a bronze replica, and there are some very high quality bronze replicas already out there that served as good models for like the patina and things like that. There's a great bronze in Copenhagen, full scale, great bronze in Florence, Italy, only a half mile from the original. And bronze is such a sort of, this is gonna sound, you know, I don't know, kind of cheesy, but it's sort of a noble medium, just like marble is. So I think I'm really excited for that. And the sculpting is done.
wow.
It needs the patina needs to be done. There's some things at the base that need to be done, but it's in Italy. Now, Italians move on Italian time, and now they're moving on like COVID Italian time. But like, I've seen photographs of the finished sculpture, so I'm excited for when it gets reinstalled at some point in 2021. And I'm excited to see. I mean, it's going to be a 17-foot statue on a crane, lowered in. It's going to be amazing. I hope to have Gail from KTLA there. So I told her about it this morning, and she's on board. So
Great.
yeah.
Did it just smash to smithereens, or what happened to it?
Many pieces. We donated a significant portion of it to David Flores. We took it over to his studio last week, and he's going to make a new artwork out of it. And then
that's exciting.
It's really cool. It's very cool. And then one of the feet and the better hand is going to the California Art Club, and it's going to be sort of a teaching tool for them. So
that's great.
Yeah, it'll be, you know, and then we have a previous one that fell, and the head and foot are in the museum gallery, in the front gallery. So I'll show you that when I give you a tour, when it's safe to give you a tour. And it's like, it's great to be up close with it. Like the foot, the big toe is the size of my fist. It's it's so big. So it's kind of crazy, but I look forward to when it gets replaced. So yeah. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to the 47 strong participants who stuck with us for the full hour and a half ride. At this point, I'm gonna call it quits at this point. But thank you so much. And have a great evening, everyone. Have a good evening and a great holiday, David and Steffi.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Same to you.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.